Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
There's no magic wand. People are getting back home on a gradual basis.
3 years after a devastating fire wiped out Lytton, many are still waiting to return and rebuild.
I didn't even know where to begin.
Plus,
it just bothers me that they care more about making money than other people's safety.
System's broken.
what do you mean? Police in BC say a startling number of safer supply drugs are ending up for sale illegally on the streets. CBC News follows a drug bust on Vancouver Island amid the toxic drug crisis. And
Human-bear conflict is something that has always been a concern to the residents.
Port Moody gets officially bear smart to try to save more animals and keep people safe.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Nearly 3 years have passed since wildfires wiped out Lytton, destroying hundreds of homes. Politicians vowed to rebuild, but progress has been slow and challenging. Yvette Bren spoke with people who lost everything and are still waiting to return.
3 years ago, George Brown watched fire consume his community.
They said, you better get your ass home. He said, it's going towards your place.
Like many, he lost everything and had no insurance.
You know, I just sitting there, I didn't even know where to begin.
Those who lost homes found shelter where they could. Ken Pite has lived in a trailer since the fire.
We were living in a powder keg, and we were only going to get through the day if nobody did anything stupid.
The fire that killed 2 people happened the day after Lytton had the hottest day ever recorded in Canada. More than 1,000 fled, some for good.
The village itself that was burned out, is 7 blocks long. So to lose even one makes a huge impact.
Nobody imagined waiting so long to rebuild.
One thing that's surprising is the slowness and the bureaucracy that has to be waded through.
Other communities destroyed by fire have rebuilt. But here, despite more than $174 million in federal and provincial recovery funds, few are home.
There's no magic wand. People are getting back home on a gradual basis.
Part of the delay is the result of discoveries made after the town burned.
So we knew that we were walking on the bones of our ancestors for the most part. Lytton is a storied place.
Burned soil was removed, revealing thousands of artifacts. Archaeological screening and tougher building codes upped delays and costs for many.
We were fortunate that we didn't have any artifacts found on our property.
She was insured and got one of the first of only 15 approved permits.
This place will always be Lytton, and it's got a lot of heart, and we're not going away.
Her house, a long-awaited sign of rebirth. Yvette Bren, CBC News, Lytton, BC.
Darius Madavi joins us now with a first look at the weather and some new information about wildfires in BC.
Yes, this is a new study that just came out looking at the most extreme wildfires globally over the last 20 years. From 2003 to 2023, they found that the number of these extreme fires, defined as the top 0.01% of fires, has more than doubled. So these are the most intense energetically fires. And so this is looking at the 20 most extreme of each year and looking at how intense those fires were. And you can see a 2.3-fold increase, so more than doubling, also doubled the frequency of these events. Now, if we take a look at where this is happening, you'll notice, generally what you have to know about this graph is that the more red it is, the more recent that fire happened. And so if you take a look here, you can notice in Canada, a lot of those dots are red because the fires here are happening in the most recent years. We're seeing more and more of those fires. In addition to Canada, more northern parts of Russia and in Australia as well. We're seeing more of these recent fires. And largely that's because of the landscape that's happening here and the fact that we are warming here in BC, and especially northern BC, much faster than other parts of the world. So this is a map of all the different types of landscapes, ecoregions that you can have. And if we zoom in to Canada, you'll notice that BC is primarily dominated by this very specific one called temperate conifer forests. This specific type of ecoregion, which you'll notice, really only BC, a little bit down the coast of the US, a tiny bit over in Europe as well, but generally just BC. In that landscape, we've seen the number of these extreme fires increase by 11 times in the last 20 years. So that is a far bigger increase than any other type of this landscape. And again, It's happening here in BC. This is where we're seeing this huge jump in these number of extreme fires. This boreal forest region, the taiga as well, also seeing a 7 times increase. But just overall, this is where we're seeing these extreme fires. Now, this fire season hasn't been as bad, largely because we've been a little bit cooler, a little bit wetter than usual across parts of BC. Not everywhere, but that's been the general trend. We do have some more precipitation on the way across BC as well. So hopefully our fire danger will stay low and we won't see a big spike in fires anytime soon.
Okay, Darius, thanks very much.
Thank you.
They are prescription pills meant to help deal with BC's grinding, deadly, toxic drug crisis. But police say an alarming number of safer supply drugs are ending up for sale illegally on the streets. Jason Proctor follows the trail of a drug bust on Vancouver Island and uncovers how so-called diversion happens and why some argue the system is broken.
In the small city of Campbell River, a major drug case is heading to court.
Yeah, Miss Lewis, can I talk to you? We're with CBC. We're doing a story because the RCMP said they seized a bunch of safe supply drugs at your property on Nursery Road.
It's a bust that surprised police because some of the drugs were meant to solve the opioid crisis.
We wanted to talk about safe supply. I guess how the drugs are making their way apparently out of the safe supply into...
The system's broken.
What do you mean? Tell me, though. What do you mean by the system's broken?
The system she's talking about is safe supply, prescription pills meant to replace toxic street drugs like fentanyl. But police say an alarming amount is being sold on the streets, a process known as diversion.
There's been at least 2 files that I'm aware of where we've said to the Crown Council that we believe that these are safe supply.
Inspector Jeff Preston heads Campbell River's RCMP detachment. Earlier this year, they seized a huge amount of fentanyl, coke, and methamphetamine, along with 3,500 safe supply pills.
Those pills become a currency, or can become a currency, if you were so inclined to trade them.
And then those pills, wherever they come from, what currency do they have beyond then that next step?
Well, the individuals that are purchasing all the pills up, they're trafficking them to new clients.
From the outset of the Safe Supply program, even advocates of safe supply acknowledged some drugs would end up on the street.
The hydromorphine is being resold by the user.
But the extent of the problem is the subject of hot debate.
Powerful heroin-like drugs that are paid for by tax dollars and have funded a black market for fentanyl and killed so many people.
This fight against evidence-based programs that are actually saving lives just has to stop. People are dying, but not for the reasons they're giving.
There's been a lot of debate about the effectiveness of the Safe Supply program and the degree to which safe supply drugs are winding up in the middle of the illicit drug market. But what there hasn't been in the middle of this debate is a lot of facts. That's why we came to this courthouse in Campbell River to unseal this search warrant.
It reveals how investigators followed the residents of this home on a local First Nation as they met with known drug users and street-level drug traffickers. Husband and wife Chris and Leah Lewis have been charged along with 2 other women who all live in the house. They're accused of possession for the purpose of trafficking hydromorphone, the safe supply drug more commonly known as dilaudid.
You are the Leah Lewis who is charged with that, and you're on the list.
Leah Lewis.
Yeah,
Remember Leah Lewis?
Well, what do you think about safe supply? Talk to me about it.
We tried talking to her about these charges, but she wouldn't comment.
Leah, can I talk to you about it?
I would prefer not to.
And so when they had this bust on Nursery Road, what did you think?
Well, I was shocked, to be honest. That's not something, we were anticipating. We did know about some of the harder drugs, the stuff that people were overdosing from. We've seen people that overdosed. But when we saw the safe supply, I was like, wow, this is really, really happening.
So explain to me a bit about the gate and I guess how it works.
Yeah, so when a car pulls up, if they were going to my house, they would just push my code.
Chief Ronnie Chakite heads the Weewakai First Nation. They first built this gate to keep COVID out. Now they're using it to keep drug dealers out.
We had one house that used to receive, 30 to 40 cars per day.
30 to 40 cars a day?
Yes, a day. And once we put in the gate, you know, it was down to 1 car a day.
Chikite says it's part of his job to protect First Nations youth from the ravages of the drug trade. He's worried safe supply drugs are ending up in their hands.
It just shows you that it's, you know, it's not a safe supply. I think the program had intentions, but it's obviously failed. That's just my opinion of how I see it. I mean, I know the government officials see it different, but this is how we're seeing it as, you know, as a nation of our size and seeing the amount that was there. I mean, it's unfortunate, but I just feel that it's not the system we need.
It's a system these people depend on. A lineup forms every morning outside this pharmacy in Campbell River. Cars circulate. People walk in and out with pills.
This is the safe supply, and that's what they look like. 8 milligrams of Dilaudid. These are an opiate.
William Cook says it can get chaotic here some mornings, with people milling about looking to buy or trade for safe supply.
I'm assuming that they buy them for next to nothing off people that are desperate. They take them to places that are remote, possibly, and probably sell them for triple or more, where people can't get them.
What do you think about that?
I think it's horrible. For some people, it's probably an income, or they'd starve. I think it's wrong, of course, because it's against the law. Some people need it to eat. That is a fact.
Safe supply drugs are turning up in busts in other parts of the province. In another search warrant obtained by CBC, police watched for weeks as an accused drug trafficker stood outside of this Prince George pharmacy trading harder drugs for safe supply. It's something you don't need to be a police officer to notice.
Like, this is just like a collection of bottles with labels and drugs that I found in bottles near the pharmacy.
Colin Middleton is tracking what he calls proof of diversion in Nanaimo, another Vancouver Island community struggling with a drug problem.
It's mostly hydromorphone. I mean, there's like 24 hydromorphone daily.
He heads a public safety group, and he's collected dozens of empty pill bottles outside a pharmacy dispensing safe supply a few blocks from his home.
It's clear that a lot of these people are just taking the drugs out of the bottles and handing them over to somebody else. Nobody that I associate with or in our group, you know, has any issue with people taking medications as prescribed by their doctor. But like, that's not what's happening.
Middleton doesn't dispute the gravity of the toxic drug crisis. He sees it all around him. He says someone died in his backyard.
Middle of the night, it woke my wife and I up, and the next day we went out there and we could find used drug paraphernalia still there. Like, it wasn't even cleaned up.
Middleton says he was angered by the open drug use in the neighborhood where he's raising kids. He says governments need to provide solutions that are safe for communities as well as drug users.
I think the taxpayers are getting ripped off. Like, why? Because we're paying for a public health system to provide medical support for people who need it. But if the drugs aren't being used for their intended purpose, and they're being sold into the black market for profit, organized criminals and gangs are profiting. And that is a direct assault on the tax-paying public.
We didn't come to Campbell River to debate the merits of safe supply. It's been a lifesaver for many. Last year, toxic drugs killed 47 people in this small region.
These are Dilaudid 8 milligrams. I get 10 of them a day, so I take 2 every 4 hours.
Shauna Adams says these pills are getting her back to a normal life. She says she'd never sell them.
Do you ever see people like hanging around the clinic trying to get them from people?
Yeah.
How much does that happen?
Every day.
Every day?
Every day. Yeah.
Like in what kind of way? What happens?
You just hang around and ask for them. Ask if you're selling your pills, or you want to trade your pills. Every day.
Every day. How does that make you feel?
It bothers me. It just bothers me that they care more about making money than other people's safety. That's what really bothers me.
Adams has 2 young boys. She wants to be around to watch them grow up. She says she doesn't want anything to do with diversion.
I kind of just don't listen to it because I don't want to be a part of it. So.
Okay, how come?
Because I'd rather live than die. That clearly makes sense, but yeah, I don't want to cheat the system here. I like my doctor. I don't want to lie to her. So if I don't need these, why am I on them?
We wanted to look beyond arguments about safe supply and actually drill down into the circumstances of a case where police say safe supply pills are showing up in the middle of the illicit drug stream. And, you know, really, it's crucial to bear in mind that underscoring all of this is a toxic drug crisis that in British Columbia alone last year killed more than 2,500 people. Jason Proctor, CBC News, Vancouver.
Students and parents of a school destroyed by fire last October want to know when rebuilding will begin. They rallied at the old site of the Hazel Trembath Elementary in Port Coquitlam. Caroline Chan has more on their demands.
This is now what the site of the former Hazel Trembath Elementary School in Port Coquitlam looks like. The burnt-out structure has been removed, and now all that remains is this void. A fire in October destroyed the structure, which investigators say was criminal in nature. Students and staff members were forced to move to a temporary location about 20 minutes away.
It's been really hard. We moved, my husband and I chose this neighborhood. We lived just over there on the other side of the trees so we could walk to the school. Having my kids attend their community school was really, really important to us. So this has just been devastating.
Now, 8 months on, many are still waiting for the BC Ministry of Education to give a clear timeline on when the rebuild will happen.
People are questioning, wondering, when are we going to find out if the school is going to be rebuilt and how long is it going to take for them to decide. So it's just kind of been a waiting game.
The Minister of Education told the CBC that they're fully committed to rebuilding Hazel Trembath and that, quote, "We appreciate everyone's patience while we work to rebuild the school for the Coquitlam school community, and we will share more as the rebuild planning progresses with the district." School District 43 says it has included a full replacement of the school in its capital plan to the ministry. Now it's just up to the ministry for the next steps. Caroline Chan, CBC News, Port Coquitlam.
Former BC Premier John Horgan is dealing with cancer for a 3rd time. Health Minister Adrian Dix confirmed that news during a news conference in Surrey.
My dear friend of a very, very long time and former Premier of British Columbia, John Horgan, has had a new diagnosis of cancer. I understand he's taken a leave as in his new job as ambassador to Germany. We know the battles he's gone through with cancer, and we know that he is going to do that again, and just providing all our thoughts and prayers and support to John.
Horgan is in hospital in Berlin, where he's serving as Canada's ambassador to Germany. He was diagnosed with bladder cancer in 2008 and declared cancer-free after surgery and treatment. He was diagnosed again in late 2021, but the following year said he was cancer-free again following 35 radiation treatments. Green Party MLA Adam Olsen says he will not be running for a 3rd term this fall. This decision comes after Olsen says he went through an existential re-evaluation after 3 people died in his district in the last year.
As my 2024 campaign ramped up, it became increasingly difficult to stand on your doorstep asking you for your support, knowing my heart was questioning whether I could continue to serve the constituency in the same way as I've served it over the last 7 years.
Olsen is one of only 2 Green Party MLAs in the BC legislature right now. He's represented Saanich North and the Islands since 2017. He says he wants to spend more time with his family and will continue to work for the Greens as campaign chair. A man has pleaded guilty to assaulting a CBC camera operator. The incident happened in 2022 near the border in South Surrey at a protest against COVID-19 restrictions. Yasmin Khanea has the details.
Vojislav Zimukik, seen here in the white cap, was charged with assault. He spit on a member of the media, a CBC camera operator at a border protest in February 2022. The 58-year-old Coquitlam man pleaded guilty to 1 count of assault in provincial court Tuesday morning. In 2022, hundreds gathered at an intersection in Surrey just north of the Pacific Highway border crossing, protesting COVID-19 vaccine mandates and other restrictions, joining similar movements across the country. In Ottawa and at the Coutts border crossing in Alberta. At the Surrey border, several journalists reported being swarmed by the crowd.
How do you sleep at night?
In a statement, the CBC's head of public affairs says we are all too aware of the significant challenges our journalists face every day, most notably in the field. Their safety and well-being remains a top priority of CBC News management and more broadly with the senior executive team. A sentencing date has not yet been set for Zimukik. That will be determined in July. Yasmin Ranea, CBC News, Vancouver.
The 4 men charged with murder in the killing of Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Surrey last year appeared briefly in court today. Their case has now been put over until August 7th as Crown and Defence work through the disclosure of evidence. A spokesperson for the BC Gurdwaras Council says they understand the process is not fast.
And I think a lot of people have been in our community. They want to see some quick results. But we do understand that it's going to take a little while for us to get to a trial and then for the trial to complete.
Indian nationals Karan Brar, Amandeep Singh, Kamalpreet Singh, and Karanpreet Singh are each charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Hardeep Nijjar was shot dead outside his Surrey Gurdwara last June. Nijjar's death has sparked deep tensions between Canada and India, with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau saying credible intelligence linked the killing to India's government, something India denies. It's called Bear Smart, an effort to build communities where people and bears can coexist in urban environments. Another city has now been officially given that designation. As Michelle Morton explains, it comes after conservation officers killed a record high number of black bears last year.
Fort Moody is joining the list of BC communities with official Bear Smart status. The province's Bear Smart community program is voluntary and aims to reduce human-bear conflicts in residential areas with a series of set criteria. Other Bear Smart communities include Squamish, Kamloops, Coquitlam, and Port Hardy.
Human-bear conflict is something that has always been a concern to the residents, and being able to take this step towards being a Bear Smart community has provided us with an opportunity to actually reduce that and reduce bear kills.
In 2023, the BC Conservation Officer Service killed more than 600 black bears across the province. And they say the number one reason is because the wild animals became habituated to garbage left out.
Port Moody has taken a bunch of educational measures. They've introduced bylaws for restricting when you can have garbage out to the morning of garbage day. And they also have a bear hazard assessment.
Up until the end of April, there have been 29 black bears killed by conservation officers so far this year, a number a nonprofit in North Vancouver is working to keep down.
The most common attractant that we see is garbage and food waste that isn't stored properly or isn't separated properly.
Volunteers work to educate residents in neighborhoods where black bears have been spotted about storing attractants to prevent them from coming into town.
We're seeing the wildfires that are pushing animals around, droughts that are affecting our salmon and things like that. So I think that brings it more into focus, how important it is that as individuals we do everything that we can to help keep the animals healthy and safe where we live.
The North Shore Black Bear Society says fruit trees, bird feeders, and organics are also commonly reported attractants. Michelle Morton, CBC News, Vancouver.
We have an update on that terrifying school bus crash north of Lac La Hache last week. BC Highway Patrol says at least 17 people were taken to hospital by air and ground ambulance. The bus crash was followed by a second collision where a pedestrian was struck and killed at the same spot. Police say witnesses saw the pedestrian crossing the road to help after the bus went down the embankment. The cause of the crash and the pedestrian's death is still unclear. Transit police say too many drivers in Metro Vancouver are using bus-only lanes. So officers say they're cracking down, including with a ticketing blitz. CBC News tagged along with police to see who's breaking the road rules.
Hi there. So you're being stopped for driving in the bus lane. That bus lane is 7 to 7.
We're out here with our targeted mobile enforcement team, and we're focusing on a 4-day project that is focused mainly on bus lane enforcement. So people driving in bus lanes when they shouldn't be. We're out and about different locations throughout the day during rush hour traffic to try and hopefully bring education, awareness, and ticket the offenders. It's important for people to understand that just because there's rush hour traffic, scooching over into the HOV lane or the bus lane is not safe. That lane is intended for buses, and they're driving at the posted speed limit. So by coming over into that lane at a standstill, the chances of having a collision with a bus is a lot higher, and it's just not safe for the bus operator. They're there doing their job, driving that bus, trying to get people from point A to point B safely, and everybody on board that bus wants to get where they're going. Just want to make sure that people understand what the diamond symbol is on the roadway when you see it. It is not strictly an HOV lane. The diamond symbol indicates it's a restricted or reserved lane. So that means it could be a bus lane, it could be an HOV lane. And make sure you're looking at the signage that goes with that symbol on the ground. It'll be clearly posted who and when they can drive in that lane. The fine for driving in a bus lane is $109.
Will Vancouver ever beat that claim it's a no-fun city? After the break, we took a look at what some think it needs to do to turn up the fun, especially at night. Cities around the world, including Ottawa, have brought in nightlife commissioners. It's a role meant to establish and shape a city's party scene. Given that Vancouver was unofficially coined No Fun City many years ago, partly due to its complaints over its lack of nightlife, we're now joined by Noor Ghazel to take a look at what this city's nightlife perhaps needs. She's a co-founder of Centaur Productions, and you're also on the city's Arts and Culture Advisory Committee.
Yes, that's right.
We appreciate you coming in. Do you think Vancouver still deserves that label, No Fun City?
I think yes and no. I think there's a huge push now to revive it. That's what we're seeing. But I think the main problem is that the nightlife is not reflective of the demographics of the city anymore. Population that is mainly from minority communities. And then half the population are not native English speakers. So if you have an entertainment scene that is not reflective of that, the nightlife is going to take a hit.
So what would be the ways that you would want to shape the nightlife in the city now?
Definitely to make more space and to have a lot more efforts in the nighttime economy. I think what Ottawa is doing is great. Ottawa notoriously also is a no-fun city.
We've heard that before.
Yeah, and I think Vancouver has so much potential. There's so much talent here. It's just we really need to put our focus on the nightlife because there's a strong need for it and strong hunger as well. That's what we're seeing a lot from our own events.
We know that Granville Street is known as a lot of the party place. Would there be other areas that you would target specifically?
Honestly, there's so many amazing neighborhoods now with so much potential. I mean, even like Strathcona, we're seeing a lot of potential there. I mean, Commercial Drive. Honestly, any neighborhood can use a good nightlife because people are moving to so many, I mean, even outside of the main kind of core, there's a lot of demand for nightlife, yeah.
What sort of events do you put on with Centaur Productions? And if it's in the city, what are some of the challenges you're running into?
So the kind of events we do are mostly club events with the DJs, live performers, musicians, shows. So we're not married to just the music, but that's where our love is. We do a lot of we bring a lot of global talent, but we also try to focus on the local artists. And I think that's actually where a lot of the problem is, and that's maybe where we need more support. We're finding that when the annual income, the average income for a musician is $18,000 a year in Vancouver, which is crazy for the city, people don't have time to hone their craft and to focus on the things they love, like music. And so we're finding there's a lack of support for the local artists here. So, yeah.
And lastly, if somebody was to want to set up something more nightlife in the neighborhood, how do you balance that off with perhaps concerns from neighbors who would be concerned about noise or traffic or something like that?
Yeah, that's tough. I know. I mean, I think having like a designated kind of like nightlife district helps a lot. But I think as the city continues to grow, which it is, I mean, we're expected to hit like 4 million by 2050. That's insane. I think
region-wide.
Yeah, like that's in Metro Vancouver. Like I mean, the reality is that people need these spaces, and we're going to have these things, but I think we can contain it to some extent. It doesn't have to be in quiet, like family neighborhoods, of course. Yeah.
A work in progress. Noor Ghazel, we really appreciate your time and your insights. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
After a stunning by-election loss for the federal Liberals, questions are being asked about the Prime Minister's future. That story next. The federal Liberals suffered a stinging loss in a by-election in Toronto early this morning. The Conservatives won a narrow victory in the long-time Grit stronghold of Toronto St. Paul's. As Ashley Burke reports, the results are raising questions about the Prime Minister's future.
A stunning win for the Conservatives. Candidate Don Stewart turning Toronto St. Paul's blue for the first time in 30 years.
I don't think this is the speech anybody thought I'd be making tonight. I didn't think so. I don't think our opponents thought so.
The Conservatives' first seat in urban Toronto since 2011.
We're gonna bring it home.
And a surprise victory in the Liberal fortress of Toronto over candidate Leslie Church. Voters say the results send a clear message to her party and its leader.
People, generally speaking, are tired of the Trudeau administration.
It's time for a change in Canada. You've got to get off the path you're on, or you're going to wreck the party.
This was obviously not the result we wanted.
The Prime Minister says he hears people's concerns and frustrations.
It's clear that I and my entire Liberal team have much more work to do.
But experts say these results confirm what the polls have shown for months, that Trudeau and the Liberals are in deep trouble.
If they can't win Toronto St. Paul's, they might be battling the Bloc Québécois for official opposition status rather than competing with the Conservatives to form a government if these results are replicated across the country.
This is a disappointing result.
As the result raised questions about Justin Trudeau's future, publicly members of his caucus are standing behind him.
The Prime Minister is committed to leading us into the next election, and he has our support.
I know that he'll have to reevaluate and look at the results of last night's by-election and do some reflecting, but that's up to him.
Nobody's going to last forever as a politician, but that calculus, that walk in the snow is for him to make, not for me, not for me to push him over in the snowbank.
Privately, some Liberal MPs tell CBC News there needs to be a major change in the Liberal Party, and that could mean Trudeau has to go. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
Inflation in Canada unexpectedly ticked up in May. The Consumer Price Index, or headline inflation, rose at an annual rate of 2.9%. That's up from 2.7% the month before. As Nisha Patel reports, it could play a role in the Bank of Canada's next interest rate decision.
After cooling for 4 months in a row, overall inflation heated up in May to 2.9%.
I think we were all a little surprised. We saw kind of an inching up across a lot of categories here that Statistics Canada tracks on inflation. So that's not really great news.
Canadians paid more for rent, with prices rising by nearly 9% over the last year.
We've seen phenomenal population growth, and of course the supply of housing couldn't keep up with a tripling really of the pace of growth in the demography.
Food prices also edged up. Groceries are now 20% higher compared to 4 years ago.
Being single and everything like that, I try to make my groceries last a little longer.
The thing is, I run out of money, so I gotta live on credit. And, it's very hard.
While those who can afford to travel are paying more for tours and airfares.
Since the pandemic, we've seen prices on some routes will double in a day, 50% increase in price.
It's a setback for the Bank of Canada, which is trying to bring inflation back down to its target of 2%. Hopeful that its goal was in reach, the central bank started cutting interest rates earlier this month. In recent days, Governor Tiff Macklem has said the bank will make decisions one meeting at a time.
We're going to be looking at the data that's coming out. We're going to be assessing what that means for the future path of inflation, and that really will determine what we do with interest rates.
The central bank meets again in July, but the chances of another interest rate cut are now smaller, as the road to lower inflation looks a little more bumpy. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
Canada's healthcare sector is turning to the temporary foreign worker program to fill jobs. As Paula Tuhachuk explains, hospitals, clinics, and care facilities are increasingly using the program to fill persistent staffing shortages in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic.
The bulk of the hiring last year was for nurse aides, orderlies, and patient service associates. This is a position that could be known by a few different names depending on where you are in the country, like healthcare aides or personal support workers. We see that there were about 2,500 approvals of those jobs, up from just 16 a few years ago. The data shows there's also growing interest in hiring registered nurses. There were about 600 of those positions approved last year. As for family doctors, there were about 200 of those jobs approved, and one organization we spoke with that runs walk-in clinics across Canada says they've hired 9 family doctors this way.
Obviously, we would love if there were more family physicians with permanent residency or citizen status readily available to fill the vacancies that we have right now and provide the much needed primary care to the rest of the Canadians, but unfortunately it's not the case. The demand that we're seeing from patients for access to a family doctor currently far outweighs our supply of physicians that we have that have the capacity to take on additional patients.
Now, I'll make a note that not every position approved necessarily gets filled by a temporary foreign worker, but the numbers show there's significant growing interest among healthcare employers in using the program. And some experts say this situation shows just how bad staffing shortages have become, that employers are looking to fill jobs through this program.
I think this is another example of the overall healthcare workforce crisis. We see high levels of workload, high levels of burnout, high levels of attrition. And if you can imagine that, that's a vicious circle. And we have to interrupt that in some way, shape, or form.
Still, that expert says even though this is one way to deal with staffing shortages, it's not necessarily the best way. And at a broader level, we should be putting more effort into retaining healthcare workers who are already in Canada. Paula Duhacek, CBC News, Calgary.
Still to come, protests against the rising cost of living in Kenya take a violent turn. We look at the police response after the break. Our science and climate specialist Darius Mahdavi is back with the full forecast. But before we get to that, you have some news from, is it the dark side of the moon?
Yes, yeah. We say the far side because it gets as much light as the near
Pink
side.
Floyd reference, there we are.
But, okay, fair enough. Yes, so this is the Chang'e, or Chang'e, return capsule that landed in the Inner Mongolian region of northern China earlier today, which is very exciting news. This contains the first sample we've ever gotten back from the far side of the moon. And why is that a big deal? Well, if we just look at the difference between the near side and the far side of the moon, you'll notice they're quite different. Now, there are a bunch of hypotheses about why this might be the case, but one of those possible explanations is the fact that these darker areas you see here are areas where they got cratered, just like the far side of the moon, but lava was drawn up from the core of the moon because it used to have a volcanic center, doesn't anymore. It used to have a lava-filled center, and then that filled in those gaps, and that gave us those darker patches. And the reason the near side of the moon may have gotten that more than the far side is because the near side always faces Earth. Earth has a lot of gravity. It would pull that lava towards the near side, and that could fill in a lot of those gaps, which means that a lot of the impact material that may have hit the moon when it was first forming would have been lost to that lava. And so whereas the far side of the moon would still have a lot of that early material, which means that if we could get samples from the far side of the moon, that could be our first sample of this really early solar system material that could tell us a lot about how our solar system was born and evolved. One thing that people often think is that the reason the far side would be more cratered is because the Earth blocks asteroids from hitting the near side. But as you can see from the distance between the Earth and the moon, it doesn't really block anything. So that's not the explanation. Now that my cool space stuff is out of the way, let's turn to the weather. We're already seeing some rain hitting parts of the island. That's going to make its way here to Metro Vancouver by sort of tomorrow midday, where if we take a look at what's expected to happen tomorrow sort of mid-afternoon, we start to see some of those showers make their way here to Vancouver, then continuing right through Thursday is going to be the story. If we take a look across the province, it's very similar. We got a bit of a wet forecast ahead. Ooh, I went way too far. That's all right. We got a bit of a wet forecast ahead. There's going to be rain across parts of Vancouver. Whoa, now we're just glitching out. There's going to be rain across much of the region over the next couple days, so be ready for that. In terms of temperatures, those are going to fall over the next few days before starting to recover as we get into the weekend. Still going to be quite cloudy, not very much way in the sunshine or warm temperatures, but a little bit warmer, back to seasonal. Lots of activity happening across the province tomorrow. Lots of rain, lots of storms in a few places. Weirdly, the north and central coast are actually the driest part tomorrow, which is a little bit interesting. And then across Vancouver, not a very summery forecast for you, Dan. But Friday?
Okay, and good for wildfires.
Yes.
Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Anger over Kenya's rising cost of living turned deadly today after protesters stormed that country's parliament and set it on fire. Many are opposed to a proposed tax hike. Thomas Dagla reports on the policy and the response from police.
Taking their anger to the heart of Kenya's government, protesters rushed in, ransacking the parliament building and pushing into the chamber. This man even taking the speaker's chair to address lawmakers who'd fled the room.
We don't fear you guys! You hypocrites!
Demonstrations swelled and spread to towns across Kenya. At issue, a contentious government bill that would raise taxes at a time when many are struggling with a high cost of living.
We are rejecting everything, we withdraw it.
We want the finance bill to be scrapped in totality.
With smoke billowing from the parliament building, police moved in, firing tear gas at demonstrators, including the Kenyan half-sister of former U.S. President Barack Obama.
Young Kenyans are demonstrating for their rights. They're demonstrating with flags and banners. I can't even see anymore.
Security forces were seen opening fire using live ammunition, with protesters killed, their bodies taken away. President William Ruto blamed the violence on criminals.
We shall provide a full, effective, and expeditious response to today's treasonous events.
Crucially, Ruto is still set to sign that controversial finance bill into law, even as anger boils over among Kenya's Generation Z, says this politics watcher.
It's a misreading of really the temperatures, the way they're rising, and the frustration and the pain that people are experiencing every day.
police are about to get help from Kenyan troops deployed to face civilians and stamp out the chaos. Neither side is backing down. Thomas Daigle, CBC News, Toronto.
After a 200-year absence, wild horses have now been returned to Kazakhstan. We'll show you why after this.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
CBC returns as a media partner of the Surrey Fusion Festival, July 20th to the 21st. The festival features over 50 cultural pavilions that will incorporate the theme of landmarks of the world into their displays. For more information, visit surreyfusionfestival.ca. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter and keep connected with us.
Centenarians are the fastest growing age group in the country, so says the latest data from Statistics Canada. Their numbers are poised to rise almost 10 times over the next half century.
The number of people aged at least 100 more than tripled between 2000 and 2023. Estimates suggest the number of Canadians aged 85 and older will increase threefold over the next 50 years. The rise in longevity can be attributed to improvements in healthcare and medical awareness, although for the number of the people that actually do make it to 100, genetics likely plays a role in most cases.
Przewalski horses have been returned to the wild in Kazakhstan after a nearly 200-year absence, part of an ambitious scheme to reintroduce the world's last wild horses to their original habitats.
The first group of 7 horses was transported from zoos in Prague and Berlin earlier this month. The horses will stay in an enclosure for a year to acclimate and learn to find water and food during the harsh winters. 40 more horses are expected to be returned to the area over the next 5 years. The endangered horses once roamed across Central Asia, but eventually disappeared in the wild.
One more horse story. Guide dog puppies in training were in Stanley Park today, getting the chance to take the horse-drawn ride and meet their hooved friends.
The puppies get to decide if the experience was a yay or a nay.
We got invited here by Stanley Park Horse Carriage Tours to bring our dogs and help socialize them to these very calm horses. We have up to 20 volunteer puppy raisers and dogs in training. And a big part of the volunteer job is to socialize these dogs to all kinds of environments. So the dogs get to experience horses close up, and then we're gonna go on a ride on the horse carriage. We didn't have too many dogs barking, but a couple did, and so that's why we're here, because they were a little nervous. They started barking, and we were able to help them through, and now that dog that was barking earlier is there very comfortable around the horses. We have guide dogs for the blind, we have autism and PTSD service dogs. We have a huge need for more puppy raisers, so volunteer puppy raisers that take on a dog at 7-8 weeks and then help us raise that dog to become one of those life-changing dogs.
I think every dog is life-changing.
Absolutely. How many of them do you think fell asleep in the cart?
Oh, I can't.
Hard to say.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
Tanya Fletcher will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the Nationals. So please, join her then. Good night.
Good night.